Here we are on the 17th of March. And just a year ago, March 18th, 2020, 1 year ago tomorrow, I stood before you to express my deepest concerns about completely shutting down our beloved Las Vegas, its hotels, its businesses, and its schools. The decision by one individual, which required no vote by the Nevada legislature or any other elected body, promised to cause undue hardship to hundreds of thousands of Nevadans. My plea at the time was to take a more nuanced approach, to enact safety precautions that would enable Las Vegas to continue to function. A full year later, we see some states which took this moderate approach, like more populous Florida and Texas, for example, actually realized a lower death count per 100,000 than did some states with prolonged total shutdowns like Michigan, New York, and Nevada. And that's according to Statista.com, March 8th, 2021. Nevadans, many of whom still have not been able to get through to the state's unemployment office to receive funds owed to them, suffered tremendously. Many of our small businesses and even some of our larger ones were forced to close up, to shutter their doors. And our children have suffered immeasurably. As I pleaded for moderation, some individuals, especially some certain newscasters, took great issue with my stance to enact reasonable safety precautions and entrust Nevadans and tourists to make responsible decisions. I'd like to recall what I did say on March 18th. Just a year ago in response to the governor's shutdown directive. And I quote this exactly. "It has been my intent as the mayor of this great city of Las Vegas that we would be able to remain open for business, even when realizing that there could have been constraints put upon us to which we would have reasonably adhered. Because not only do I understand, but also because I'm painfully aware and sensitive to the very many who live paycheck to paycheck, I know we and they cannot survive any total shutdown of the economy for any length of time beyond the immediate week or two. So many working in the hospitality industry, more likely in big hotels, but also those mom and pop small privately owned businesses. These are most definitely at the greatest risk. They cannot survive any lengthy shutdown, and thus my full-out efforts will be focused on keeping as many of our people as possible employed and asking our governor to shorten the projected shutdown." End quote. That was a year ago. Here we are, a full year later, our businesses are still only operating at 50% capacity, up from a bizarre 35% that was effective until 3 days ago. Some have not yet been permitted to open at all. Our children are now only returning part-time to public school in a hybrid model, and then only kindergarten through 5th in person full-time on April 6th. Tens of thousands of students have missed out on graduation, proms, extracurriculars, sports, scholarship, not to mention a year's worth of invaluable in-person instruction. In March 2020, when the governor announced in a quote, and this is a quote, a courtesy call, that he was shutting the schools down, I pleaded with him to implement safety measures and mandatory temperature checks instead for all entering the buildings. I was harshly told he was not seeking any input. There is a mantra in some circle that these draconian shutdowns saved lives. And while any one death is beyond heartbreaking, the data shows no consistent correlation in death rates between states with prolonged complete shutdowns like Nevada and those that adopted more moderate safety precautions. In fact, the 4 states with the highest death rates were the states that adopted stringent shutdown policies. One must also ask if masks and social distancing are sufficient now to slowing the spread of this virus, would that not have been sufficient a full year ago? What is the rationale for continuing, even at 50% capacity, with other precautions like mask mandates in place, in addition to increasing vaccinations? America is the land of the free, but Americans in some states, not all, have been forced to subjugate their freedoms to the will of a single individual, seemingly in perpetuity. There is no apparent sunset on emergency powers bestowed to some governors, which smacks of tyranny. I am now calling for a return to personal responsibility and personal liberty. Those who do not want to or choose to go out in public places are not forced to do so, just as those who do not want the vaccine are not forced to take them. Those who want to wear a mask, or 2 or 3 of them, are not prevented from wearing them. Masks, distancing, frequent hand washing, and sanitation are reasonable measures that health officials assure us truly make a difference. That is following the science. The science has not proven that completely shutting down accomplished anything more than moderate, reasonable precautions. Nevadans and Americans are smart enough to understand what's at stake and make appropriate choices for themselves and their families. As one caller to my office recently expressed, it is beyond sad and concerning to see Lady Liberty on our Las Vegas Strip wearing a mask. It is the antithesis of what she and America represent: personal freedom. I said this a full year ago tomorrow, and I repeat it again today. The city of Las Vegas will seek ways for people and businesses to advocate for their own lives, make their own choices, create and follow their own destinies, and live being assured they have the right to do so in dignity, earning a livelihood, providing for their families, and even helping others to enjoy those same rights and dignities. Upon these American founding principles, we will continue to stand. Thank you, my dear council persons.